All right. Hello, A's Channel Paper. I'm going to keep my voice down because I'm hiding in a room right now so I can record this lesson for you guys. So we're going to talk about cringe-worthy writing. So I was grading your all's essays and I noticed some key things that you all were getting incorrect on your essays across the board. And so I want to talk about those so you can improve upon those skills. So when you do your essay on Friday, it is as effective as possible and all your essays going forward in the future. So I'm going to walk you through some of the key things I noticed that were mistakes so we can avoid them from happening in the future. So let's get into it. Number one, colloquial language. So for those that don't know, colloquial language is non-academic language you would use when you're talking to your friends, not necessarily language you would use in an academic paper setting or a formal setting. So an example of that I noticed happened a lot was nowadays. It was especially annoying when people would say nowadays first, like the first thing. So nowadays people see the world as no, that's colloquial. You may not use it with your friends because you guys have different vernaculars, but that is a colloquial language from way back when. So we don't use that in our papers. So we would say things like in modern times or currently, but nowadays is no longer acceptable. So make sure you avoid that word. Same would be like for what's up, WASSUP, right? A word you would use with your friends maybe if you were in 1992, but not a word you're going to currently use in an academic paper. So avoid colloquial language. Next, precision of language. A lot of us like to use fluff. Listen, I'm a fan of using words. I like to overtalk. I like to overwrite. But when you're trying to write an essay, you want to be as clear and concise as possible. And so you want to avoid the fluff. I like to call it the fluff. So an example would be like the sky. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. So the wall was very dingy, or the wall was exceedingly, extremely, exacerbly dingy, right? Like 4 different adjectives to describe one thing. Yeah, when you were in elementary school, that was applauded because you were using adjectives effectively, but now you're in high school. We know you know what adjectives are. We want to see you using precise language and clear language. So an example, I don't know if you guys have read The Giver, which I hope you have, by Lois Lowry. But in the very beginning of the book, the first chapter, Jonas is struggling to find a word. There's a whole thing about precision of language, and he's trying to struggle to find this word that describes his emotion. And he thinks of the words frightened and a sickening feeling and all these other things, but he can't find the right word. And finally, it comes to him, it's apprehensive. He found a word that describes all the emotions he went through in his situation. It perfectly sums it up without flowy or with extras or unclearness. It was concise. So make sure yours is concise. There's also another great quote from, there's also a nice quote from the Dead Poets Society, if you've ever seen that movie, where he talks about how very is a lazy word, right? We don't use the word very because there's a word that's better for it. So like you wouldn't say things are you're very tired, you'd say you're exhausted. You wouldn't say I'm very sad, you'd say I'm morose, right? So we try to avoid the extra words to use precise and clear and concise language. So precision of language. Stop with the very much more and just get to your point, right? Be clear, be descriptive, but be clear. Next are your empty claims. A lot of us like to do this. We like to state a claim without providing evidence, and it's a problem, especially with the writing you're doing for me. Evidence is required. Global perspective, same thing. Evidence is required, right? Love that you have opinions. I don't care about your opinions. You need to have evidence to back them up. So if you told me everyone should drive a Subaru, why? Why should everyone drive a Subaru, right? That's an empty claim. You might tell me everyone should drive a Subaru because all their vehicles have a 5-star safety rating and they have the eyesight which prevents cars from collisions and things like that. Okay, you've given me evidence and now I understand why you think everyone should drive a Subaru. And now I'm more inclined to believe you, right? So make sure you are not stating empty claims. Next, America-centrics. I get it. We live in the United States. We've forever been indoctrinated into our country, and we should have an amount of patriotism as much as you'd like, but we can't think that America is the only place in the world. There are plenty of other countries, 195 in fact, and we are only one of them. We lead the world in things, but other places lead us in things, right? A lot of places deal with the same issues we deal with. We just are so centered on our own that we forget about them sometimes. So especially in these courses, because they are world courses, you need to focus on the world ideas. And actually, when you do your EOC for take ACE English, ACE Journal paper rather, you will notice that the questions, none of them are be centered around America because it's a global test. So it's meant for everyone in the world to take. So they may even ask things like, in your native country, what is a problem with social media? Right? They're not asking about America. They're asking your native country. For some of you, that is America. For others, it may not be because you've immigrated, right? So don't focus on America in your writing so you can gain enough information to write worldly. We want to be world citizens, not just one citizen, world citizens. Next, acronyms. If you ever use an acronym, you need to first write out what the acronym represents. So an example, right? If I were to tell you guys in AP seminar, we take 3 assessments, PT1, which consists of the IRR and the TMP, PT2, which consists of the IW and the IMP, and the EOC. You would have absolutely no idea what any of those things are because you haven't taken the course. You have no idea what they represent. They could be anything to you. You have no descriptors. Rather than that, I would write out each acronym first so you know what it represents the next time I use it. So an example would be NASA, right? NASA is actually an acronym for those that didn't know. The first time I mention it, I would say the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and that goes in parentheses, right? NASA in parentheses. Then the next time I talk about NASA, I can use the acronym because I've already told my reader what the acronym stands for. So same thing for you. Always explain your acronyms before you start using them. Next, homophones. This is a big one. And I put the 3 big ones that I noticed a lot of. One of them is my biggest pet peeve, actually. One of my biggest pet peeves. So where, there, two. All of them sound the same. They're all completely different words. And the one that I'm most particular about is the there, and that's the one I noticed the most of us were getting wrong. There with an I is for people. There with an R and an E is for direction or location. There with an apostrophe is they are. All right. We don't mix them up because it's such a simple thing. We should know these. So if you are unsure about what homophones are, I would look them up and look up the definitions and study those. I'm not going to do a full lesson on them because that's something you should have gotten a long time ago. But on your own, if you're unsure, look them up. If you don't know, find a new way to say it without using that word, right? But we don't want to get ourselves mixed up in our writing and lose our reader because of a simple, silly mistake. Okay, so look up your homophones and use the correct ones, please. Next are the contractions. So I just mentioned a contraction with there. There was also where we are. You should not use contractions in your writing. 2 reasons. 1, you can make a mistake in a contraction. It happens all the time. You use the wrong form. I even made a mistake in my explanation. It's not there with the E, it's E-Y-R-E, right? So there's a simple mistake I could have avoided if I just wrote they are. Same thing with we are, right? Write them out. The 2 reasons. 1, simple mistakes are avoided. The second, you have added to your word count, and most of your writing is for word counts. You want as many words as possible. Simple words right there. We just took 1 word and made it 2. So make sure you include the full words, not just the contractions. Next, counterclaims and rebuttals. So this is not something I instructed you to do for this essay, so I did not take any points off on this essay, but I will for the next one because I'm instructing you now. Anytime you give a counterclaim in that same paragraph, you need to supply a rebuttal. And the rebuttal, so the counterclaim is the other side. The rebuttal is you bringing it back to your side. So I'll give you an example, right? Counterclaim would be, okay, so let's say we're arguing the sky is blue. Counterclaim says that some people think the sky is green. First, I need to provide evidence as to why people think the sky is green. You cannot just state a counterclaim. It is a claim in itself. It's the other side's opinion. You need to say why people think that. So some people think the sky is green. They think this because the rolling hills in North Carolina create a greenish tint in Central America, and therefore they believe the sky is green. Now I need to state my rebuttal. However, we know that the rods in our eyes perceive greens and blues in a very similar fashion, and a reflection from the grass can actually interfere with the rods, blah, 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 whatever that evidence is. I stated why the sky is still blue. So I stated my claim, I stated my counterclaim, and then I gave a rebuttal, right? So you have a whole couple paragraphs about your claim. When you're talking about your counterclaim, you need to rebuttal it in the same paragraph. and give evidence. Okay, next. Logical fallacies. This is another one that we like to do. This is part of that claim thing, right? Making a claim without evidence. So some of us like to make these hasty generalizations. This was the common logical fallacy, and there are many more. I highly recommend you look up logical fallacies. We may dive into them in the future, but this was a key one that we're doing in our writing, and it's a hasty generalization. Well, the president is great because the president changed the law. No, president signs laws. The president enforces laws. The president doesn't create the laws, right? So there are other people involved in that. There are congressmen that have to pass things. There's a whole litany of system that has to go into place. One person may be the spark of it, but they aren't the only person involved. A lot of us like to make the statement, what was the one I kept hearing, that Abraham Lincoln ended slavery. Nope, he didn't, right? He implemented laws in place that helped to start this ending of slavery, but he himself did not do it. There were other people involved in it. He was a key figure. He absolutely led the charge. He wasn't alone. So make sure you are not hastily generalizing somebody. So not saying that Martin Luther King was the only one who created the civil rights movement. No, he didn't. He didn't even start it. He was a big part of it, a huge part of it, but he was not alone in that. And so we shouldn't give him credit for the whole thing. We can still credit him, but not the whole thing. So make sure you're being clear and not falling into those logical fallacies about generalizing things by picking those few details. Next, and this I think is the last one, is the wishy-washy language. You are writing an essay arguing a point. You need to be clear as to what your point is. No maybes, no probablys, no perhapses, right? Your opinion is fact because you have evidence to back it up. So this is the answer. It's not, this might be what we're going to say. No. That is the answer, right? Maybe someone would argue this. No, they will argue this because boom, boom, boom. Here are facts and evidence. So take out the wishy-washy language. Be clear in your writing. And that was the cringe-worthy writing I noticed. You will get your essays back, which have notes on them. Once you've read over your notes and watched this video, you can come ask me questions, and I will happily help you out as much as I can so we can do the best on our essays in the future. See you in the classroom.